Hey, How to Fix the Internet listeners. It's Cindy Cohen, the Executive Director of the Electronic Frontier Foundation. Our sixth season has wrapped up, but I wanted to tell you about a new podcast from EFF for people who care about building a better digital future. It's called EFFector, and we have just launched our very first season. In each episode, EFF's lawyers, activists, and technologists will be breaking down the week's most important stories in digital rights. They'll also tell you all about our latest work to defend your privacy and free speech online. Keep listening to hear a clip from a new episode of the EFFector podcast. And after that, be sure to find EFFector wherever you get your podcasts and subscribe. Thanks.
Have you ever seen a really creepy targeted ad online? One that reveals just how much these companies know about your life?
Well, it's not just retailers who are tapping the advertising surveillance machine to get your data. It's also the government. Today, we'll be diving deeper into how targeted advertising can reveal your location to federal law enforcement. I'm Hudson Hongo.
And I'm Christian Romero. This is EFFector from the Electronic Frontier Foundation.
So, I know we've talked about this before, Christian, but what was your creepiest targeted ad experience?
I mean, anytime I open Instagram, it's pretty creepy. It's just flooded with hoodies because I'm always looking at hoodies. So, never a good time there.
They know you're a hoodie buyer. You buy a lot of hoodies. Some database somewhere, they just have Christian hooded sweatshirts.
Wearing one right now. I mean, come on, of course.
So, obviously that unnerving feeling is related to all the data we know that's being collected. But today we're going to be talking about one of the more specific insidious uses of that data, specifically location tracking by the government. To tell us more, we're joined by Lena Cohen, staff technologist at EFF. Thanks for joining us, Lena.
Hi, happy to be here.
So last week, 404 Media published this document from Customs and Border Protection, CBP, about their use of commercially obtained location data. What was significant about this document, Lena?
Yeah, so this document was what's called a privacy threshold analysis. It's a type of record that DHS is required to complete when they're exploring a new technology. And it described a 2019 to 2021 pilot program where the DHS would use commercially available location data to track people's locations. And what was especially significant about this document is that it was the first time that the government had acknowledged that it was sourcing location data from the online advertising ecosystem, specifically real-time bidding. That's the technical system that powers most of these creepy targeted ads you see online. So even though we knew that the government purchased location data from data brokers and surveillance companies to track people's locations, and we suspected that a lot of that data came from the online advertising ecosystem, it's significant to hear the government directly acknowledging that they're taking location data from the surveillance system powering online ads.
So could you explain more, what is real-time bidding data?
Yeah, so real-time bidding is the process that determines the ads you see on nearly every website and app. The ads you see are the winners of milliseconds-long auctions that unfortunately expose your personal information to hundreds to thousands of companies a day. When you visit an app or a website with ad space, it will ask an ad tech company to determine which ad to display, and that involves sending information about you and the content you're viewing to hundreds, if not thousands, of potential advertisers. The ad tech company will package all the information they can gather about you into a bid request that can include some unique identifiers, your device details, your interests, like the fact that I hear Christian likes hooded sweatshirts, even your location data. So if an app has access to your location data, that data might be included in the bid request that's sent to hundreds or thousands of potential advertisers. Anyone posing as an ad buyer can access a massive stream of personal data that's being broadcast. So data brokers can and do eavesdrop on these real-time bidding auctions in order to collect data, including location data, about people who they have no interest in advertising to. They just want a free source of personal data that they can sell.
So, right, once this data enters the online advertising ecosystem, it just kind of goes into this whole commercial space where it can be collected, bought, sold, and this can include, like you said, location data. Now, I know that the confirmation of the real-time bidding data is new, but we already did know about a few different agencies that were using commercial location data, right?
Yeah, definitely. We knew that ICE, CBP, and the FBI had purchased location data from a data broker called Ventel and used it to identify immigrants who were later arrested. And even though we didn't know exactly the source of Ventel's data, their parent company, Gravy Analytics, suffered a data breach last year that exposed some of the apps that they may have been collecting data from. There were thousands of apps referenced in that data breach, including Candy Crush, Tinder, Grindr, pregnancy trackers, religious-focused apps. And experts who looked at the breached data, even at the time, suggested that much of the data was likely collected through real-time bidding, through these online advertising auctions. Even beyond the government directly purchasing location data from a data broker, we've known about the government purchasing a surveillance tool called Weblock, which makes it easy to visualize some of this commercially available location data. Law enforcement agents can draw a shape on a map and see identifiers for a bunch of phones that have passed through that geographic area in a certain period of time. And they can select one of those phones and see its location history over time. A lot of these data brokers claim that location data is anonymous or collected with consent, but that's almost impossible. You can't really anonymize location data because if you see where someone's sleeping, where they work, where they pick up their kids from school, it's really easy to figure out who that person is.
So a lot of this kind of makes me want to faceplant into my desk or just like run through a wall because it sounds so terrible. But I know one of the things we like to focus on is giving people tools or tips to protect themselves online. Do you have any thoughts on what people can do to protect themselves from some of this data tracking and collection?
Definitely. It's not your fault that the advertising industry has built this massive surveillance machine that can easily be co-opted by the government. Obviously, the burden shouldn't fall on individuals to protect their location data every time they use their phone. Privacy should be the default, but in the meantime, there are some steps you can take to limit how much data and location data you're sharing with other companies. First of all, if you haven't already, I recommend disabling your mobile advertising ID. That's, a unique identifier associated with your phone that data brokers use to stitch together the information they collect about you on different apps. If you have an iPhone, you've probably done this already. Disabling your advertising ID is what happens when you ask apps not to track you. Apple sends you those pop-ups before sharing your advertising ID. If you have an Android, your advertising ID is shared by default, so you definitely want to make sure to change that setting. You should also review the apps you've granted location permissions to. because if an app has access to your location, it could share it with other companies. Maybe an app developer isn't intentionally sending your location to a data broker or another company, but the advertising tool that they've built into their app is automatically harvesting your location data if you've granted the app access to it. So be careful about the apps you share your location data with, turn off your advertising ID, and if you're traveling to a sensitive location and you want a stronger security plan, there are more steps you should probably take, and EFF has a guide to protecting your location data. But the two steps I outlined, they're easy, they're fast, and they'll make it a little bit harder for location data brokers to access your information. I also recommend using a tracker blocker like EFF's Privacy Badger on your web browser and some sort of ad or tracker blocking solution on your phone.
So, like you said, it's not people's faults that all of these companies are sucking up their data and sending it into this dark ecosystem. There's a role that tech companies need to be playing here, right?
Definitely. Tech companies have built this surveillance system that the government is using to violate people's rights. So tech companies and advertising companies specifically really need to reckon with their role in building a warrantless government surveillance system. First of all, EFF has been advocating for years for a ban on online behavioral advertising and a switch to contextual advertising. That means not targeting ads based on these detailed behavioral profiles that tech companies have built about us, but instead just targeting ads based on the content of an app or a website that the ad will be on. I think that short of switching to a privacy-respecting contextual advertising system, tech companies can still make changes to limit the use of advertising systems for government location tracking. First of all, precise location data should never be broadcast through these online advertising auctions, through these real-time bidding systems. Ads can still be targeted generally to, like the city someone is in, without exposing people's exact location to data brokers and tech companies. Location data can reveal where we work, where we live, where we protest, where we worship. It's the sort of sensitive data that needs to be protected by default. Second of all, big tech companies like Apple and Google created these advertising IDs that have become the linchpin of the data broker economy, and they should remove ad IDs from devices or, at a minimum, disable them by default. That's not a crazy, unrealistic idea. Advertising IDs weren't added to phones until 2012, and Apple disabled them by default starting in 2021. And when Apple actually gave people the choice of whether or not they wanted to share this unique and trackable identifier with companies, about 96% of users opted out. So when given an easy choice, people make it clear that they don't want to be tracked, and Google should follow Apple's lead and give people that choice.
Yeah, I mean, when you spell it out as in like this company is tracking you, do you want to stop that? It's very easy for someone to be like, yeah, absolutely not. That sounds horrible. You listed out, I think, one or two things that lawmakers could do. Is there anything else that EFF is pushing them to do to stop some of this stuff that's happening, this terrible stuff?
Yeah, so we need a strong federal privacy law to stop companies from harvesting and selling our personal information every time we use the web. EFF has been advocating for years for this type of legislation, and it's important that data privacy legislation includes a strong enforcement mechanism and doesn't give companies an easy way out by burying creepy practices in terms of service that no one actually reads. Basically, it's important that data privacy law protects people's privacy and not tech companies' business models. There are unfortunately several privacy laws that were designed more by tech lobbyists to protect tech companies than to actually protect people's privacy. So second, legislators really need to close the data broker loophole of the Fourth Amendment. Instead of getting a warrant, we'll often see law enforcement agencies just buying data from location data brokers to find out where people have been. And we really need to pass legislation. EFF has advocated for legislation like the Fourth Amendment is Not for Sale Act to stop law enforcement from just buying information that they normally need a warrant to obtain.
It's a really, in my opinion, sensible sort of policy, right? Like right now we have this world where any kind of law enforcement can basically just, sidestep the Fourth Amendment, this requirement for a warrant to get people's information by just going into this shadowy market and just buying what's out there for sale.
Yeah, I mean, it's common sense. It also could and should be bipartisan.
Well, thanks again, Lena.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I think the online advertising industry has created a surveillance machine, and EFF has been saying for years how dangerous it is to have companies collecting, sharing, selling your personal data. And this is a clear example of why this surveillance-based advertising system needs to change. Companies can't surveil people's every move online and offline for the purposes of hyper-targeted advertising and not expect that surveillance system to be abused by bad actors.
EFFector is a podcast by the Electronic Frontier Foundation, the leading nonprofit defending online civil liberties. Our theme music is I Dunno by Grapes.
EFF promotes digital innovation, defends free speech, fights illegal surveillance, and protects rights and freedoms for all. Become an EFF member today at EFF.org/podfan.
Subscribe to EFFector wherever you get your podcasts.